Welcome to Stoic Philosophy for Life. This is not just a place to listen to books, it's a space to feel them with your soul. Here, we illuminate your mind with timeless lessons. Awaken your inner strength, cultivate self-minded discipline, and guide your journey of personal growth. Every word is carefully chosen to reach what you're truly seeking: peace, clarity, and lasting transformation. If this feels like the place for you, hit subscribe and walk this path with us every single day. Now, put on your headphones, take a deep breath, and begin the journey of renewing your mind and your life. Have you ever felt hijacked by your own emotions? One moment you are calm, centered, and composed, and the next, a single word, a memory, or a random comment flips a switch inside you. Anger, fear, shame, and suddenly, you are no longer in the driver's seat. The emotion takes the wheel, and you become a passenger to your own reactions. It is frustrating. It is exhausting. And if it happens often enough, it begins to feel like who you are. But what if that was never the truth? What if you could feel fully without being ruled blindly by what you feel? What if your emotions were signals you could learn to understand rather than forces you had to obey? In this video, we are going to explore a way of living that will help you stop reacting impulsively, start responding with wisdom, and master your emotions without losing your humanity. Rooted in timeless Stoic philosophy and sharpened by modern self-minded awareness, these tools will help you create space between stimulus and action so that your next decision, your next word, your next move is made from clarity, not chaos. If you stay until the end, you will walk away with practical techniques to stay composed under pressure, think clearly when emotions rise, and reclaim the inner power you forgot you had. The goal is not to suppress what you feel. It is to stop letting your feelings speak louder than your values. Let us begin here with the first and perhaps most important shift. Your emotions are visitors. You do not have to let them take over the house. They show up without asking. I memory triggers sadness. A tone sparks anger. I silence awakens fear. It happens quickly. Too quickly. But here is what the Stoics knew: just because the emotion knocks does not mean you have to hand it the keys. Just because it arrives does not mean it gets to take the lead. You are the host. You are the owner of the space. And when you remember that, you begin to act from awareness, not from impulse. That does not mean you reject your emotions. That is not the Stoic path. The path is this: welcome the feeling with calm awareness. Say, I see you. I know why you are here. But I choose what happens next. That pause right there is where your emotional maturity is born. There is a moment, small, almost invisible, that exists between what happens to you and what you do next. It is the space between the trigger and the choice. Most people never notice it. They move too fast. They feel too strongly. A word cuts deep, and they snap. A delay stings, and they spiral. A moment of shame arises, and they run from it. In that flash of reactivity, the mind is no longer the driver, the emotion is. But here is what the Stoics practiced, again and again: expand that space. Train the pause. In that pause, they said, lies your freedom. The difference between a life led by impulse and a life guided by clarity often comes down to that one breath. That 1 second. That inner moment when you catch the emotion before it moves your hands, your voice, your decision. Reacting is easy. It is primal. It is ancient wiring. Something threatens your ego, and you lash out. Something disrupts your comfort, and you shut down. It is fast, automatic, often satisfying, but rarely wise. Because reaction is not a conscious choice. It is a surrender. You are handing your power to the emotion. You are letting the feeling lead, not your intention. Response is something else entirely. Response is awareness in action. It is deliberate. It is chosen. It sees the emotion without being consumed by it. It feels the heat but does not throw fuel on the fire. And this is not some abstract ideal. It is something you can practice daily, moment by moment, until it becomes your default. Marcus Aurelius faced betrayal, war, death, political instability. And yet, his writings are filled with reminders not to react, but to return to values, to breath, to reason. He did not see calm as weakness. He saw it as command. And so must we. Think about your own life. How many of your regrets were born not from deep thought, but from immediate reaction? How many arguments spiral because of one sentence you wish you could take back? How many opportunities were missed because fear shouted louder than focus? Now imagine a different path. Imagine building that the space between emotion and expression. Imagine catching yourself right as the anger rises and choosing stillness instead. Imagine meeting fear with curiosity. Imagine facing sadness without collapsing into it. That shift begins with one question: who do I want to be right now? Because in the end, that is what response is. It is identity in action. It is your highest self, not your most wounded self, stepping forward. The world will always give you reasons to react. People will misunderstand you. Life will challenge your plans. Emotions will stir and tempt and provoke. But none of them, not one, has the power to decide your next move unless you hand it to them. And here is something most people never realize: every time you pause before acting, you are rewiring your mind. You are training your nervous system to trust stillness. You are building a self that is not led by mood, but by mission. And over time, that changes everything. People will feel it. They will notice you are not easily pulled, not easily provoked. That when others spiral, you stay anchored. That when the room is loud, your silence carries weight. That kind of presence is rare and it is magnetic. But it is not easy, especially at first, because your body is used to moving fast. Your ego is used to being defended. Your pain is used to being fed. So the pause will feel uncomfortable. It will feel unnatural. But that discomfort is not weakness. It is growth. It is your old habits protesting the arrival of your higher self. So practice. Start small. When something triggers you, take one breath. Just one. Let your body catch up to your intention. Let your thoughts settle long enough for your wisdom to surface. You do not need to respond right away. You are allowed to be silent. You are allowed to say, "Let me think about this." You are allowed to step back before you speak forward. That is not indecision. That is maturity. It is how you protect your peace without abandoning your truth. It is how you stay strong without becoming sharp. It is how you hold boundaries without becoming bitter. Because here is the truth: not every emotion deserves an action. Not every feeling is a signal to move. Some emotions are teachers. They ask to be heard, not obeyed. They arise to show you something, not to lead you somewhere. And when you learn to pause, you can hear them more clearly. You can say, "This is anger. It is here. But I do not have to act from it." You can say, "This is fear. I understand it, but I choose not to speak from it." You can say, "This is sadness. It wants to pull me under, but I will sit with it instead of becoming it." That inner dialogue, that calm inner witnessing, is not detachment. It is awareness. And awareness is the seed of mastery. So train the pause like you would train a muscle. Practice it in small moments. A slow breath before you check your phone. A question before you send that text. A silence before you raise your voice. Every small pause is a reminder you are not a puppet of your feelings. You are a person with power. And that power is not about dominance. It is about direction. It is about deciding again and again who you are going to be. You are not your first reaction. You are your chosen response. Emotion is not weakness. That is one of the most powerful truths the Stoics ever offered. Emotion is not something to be ashamed of. It is not a flaw to be fixed or a signal that something is broken. Emotion is energy. Alive. Untamed. It moves like fire, able to warm, illuminate, or destroy depending on whether you guide it or let it run wild. The Stoics never told us to stop feeling. They told us to lead what we feel. Every emotion carries information. It shows up because something matters to you. You get angry when a value feels violated. You'll feel fear when something is uncertain or fragile. You feel shame when identity and expectation collide. The emotion is a signal. But if you do not stop to understand the signal, if you just act on it, you turn meaning into mess. You take energy meant to inform you, and you let it control you. That is the danger. Not in the emotion itself, but in the absence of reflection. And that is why the Stoics place so much importance on thought, on framing, on meaning. Epictetus said, "It is not things that disturb us, but our interpretation of things." The same applies to emotion. What you think about a moment determines how you feel about it, and how you feel shapes what you do. Which means if you change how you think, you can change what that emotion becomes. Take anger, for example. If you believe someone is disrespecting you, your anger becomes defense. But if you believe they are projecting their own pain, that same anger might become compassion or silence. The trigger has not changed, but the interpretation has. And with it, the emotion's destination shifts too. That is not mental gymnastics. That is mental leadership. Seneca said we suffer more in imagination than in reality. What he meant was this: emotions are often the children of unchallenged thoughts. You think you are being rejected, so you feel hurt. You think you are failing, so you feel shame. But what if you questioned those thoughts before the emotion fully formed? What if you asked, is this true? Or is this an old narrative resurfacing? Because most emotions do not come from the moment. They come from the story you attach to the moment. And if you change the story, you change everything. This is not about lying to yourself. It is not about toxic positivity or pretending everything is fine. It is about choosing the most accurate and empowering interpretation of what is happening. Not to escape, but to act wisely. Imagine this: you feel fear before a big conversation. You could believe that fear means something is wrong. You could let it stop you. Or you could pause, breathe, and realize that fear often shows up not as danger, but as a sign that you are standing at the edge of growth. You could reframe the fear as readiness, as a sign that you care deeply. That reframe does not eliminate the emotion. It gives it a new job. And suddenly, what would have shut you down now moves you forward. That is the power of thought. That is the fire guided by direction. So ask yourself today, what emotion keeps visiting me? What story do I tell that fuels it? And what would happen if I questioned that story, not ignored the feeling, but lead it with clarity? Because when you learn to lead your emotions, not deny, not suppress, but guide them, you begin to transform your experience of life. Anger becomes courage. Sadness becomes depth. Fear becomes awareness. The emotion does not vanish. It evolves. That is Stoic alchemy. Not turning emotion into stone, but into strength. And this process takes practice. Start by slowing down. When a strong emotion arises, do not immediately respond. Instead, name it. Say to yourself, this is frustration. This is fear. This is shame. Just naming the feeling creates distance. It turns chaos into something visible. It gives you space to work with it, not from it. Next, ask what thought or belief is behind this emotion. Maybe you are believing you are not enough. Maybe you are believing they are judging you. Maybe you are assuming the worst. Identify the belief. Then ask, is this belief true? Is it helpful? Is it mine or something I inherited? That small moment of inquiry can save you hours of suffering. It can stop a spiral before it begins. It can turn emotional energy from destruction into momentum. Over time, this habit rewires your emotional system. You stop living in reaction. You start moving with reflection. You stop letting emotions dictate your identity and start using them to define your growth. Because you are not broken because you feel deeply. You are powerful when you learn how to direct what you feel. Emotions, when left unchecked, tend to seek control. They are like waves, natural, inevitable, but powerful enough to pull you under if you do not know how to swim. And most people? They try to outrun the wave. Suppress it. Pretend it is not there. Or worse, they ride it without direction, letting it take them wherever it wants. But the Stoics, they learn it to stand in the water. Not to stop the wave, but to move with it, eyes open, feet steady, heart clear. This is the daily practice of emotional mastery. Not one moment of breakthrough, but a series of tiny, deliberate choices. Choices made in ordinary moments, on the train when someone bumps into you, in a meeting when someone interrupts you, at home when a loved one says something sharp. These are the moments where character is shaped. Not in public applause, but in private restraint. In the decision to stay grounded when it would be easier to explode. Because emotional maturity is not about what you feel, it is about what you do with what you feel. It is in the breath you take before responding. It is in the space you protect between thought and reaction. It is in the choice to be silent when your ego wants to speak. That kind of power is not dramatic, but it is rare. And that is exactly why it is transformative. Marcus Aurelius, in The Chaos of Empire and War, wrote repeatedly about controlling the inner citadel, the mind. He did not wait for external peace to find internal stillness. He brought it with him. That is the lesson. You do not wait for your environment to calm down. You calm yourself first. And from that place, you engage. But calming yourself does not mean ignoring what you feel. It means directing it. You can acknowledge your anger and still speak with grace. You can feel hurt and still respond with clarity. That ability to feel fully, yet act wisely, is a superpower. One built not in theory, but in repetition. So how do you train that? Start where you are. Pick one situation where you often lose your emotional balance. Maybe it is with a specific person. Maybe it is in moments of failure. Maybe it is when you feel unseen or dismissed. Observe what happens. Notice your pattern, what you think, what you feel, how you react. And then interrupt it. Insert a breath. A pause. A grounding phrase like, I choose presence, or let me respond, not react. It will feel awkward at first. Slow. But that is the point. You are teaching your nervous system that it is safe to pause. That you are not in danger. That you do not have to fight or flee. You are building a bridge between impulse and intention. And over time that bridge becomes stronger. Your reactions slow down. Your thoughts get clearer. You no longer need to defend every word, prove every point, win every emotional battle. You begin to realize that most things do not require a reaction. Most things are not personal. Most emotions are not permanent. And that realization sets you free. Because once you understand that you can feel something without becoming it, you regain your power. You no longer have to follow every emotional script. You can rewrite it. In real minus time. Someone disrespects you. You do not have to match their energy. You can protect your peace by choosing your own tone. Something does not go your way. You do not have to spiral. You can reframe the moment, take the lesson, and keep moving. You feel overwhelmed. You do not need to shut down. You can take one task, one breath, one step, and that is enough. That is not avoidance. That is direction. That is leadership. Because the strongest leaders are not the loudest. They are the clearest. They are not ruled by emotion, but they are not detached from it either. They use it, channel it, shape it. And that ability starts with self-minus awareness. That is why the Stoics journaled daily. They did not journal to complain. They journaled to observe. To understand what triggered them, what beliefs were stirred, what responses were chosen, and what could be done better next time. That daily reflection turned experience into wisdom. You can do the same. At the end of the day, ask yourself, what did I feel today that I did not manage well? Why? What belief drove that reaction? What could I have done differently? These small questions, asked consistently, change your inner landscape. They turn chaos into clarity. They teach you how to be emotionally honest without being emotionally reactive. Because here is the truth: you can express emotion without losing control. You can have strong feelings without acting out. That is not repression. That is mastery. So, the next time the emotion comes, and it will, do not panic. Do not suppress. Do not immediately obey. Observe. Acknowledge. Direct. Say to yourself, this feeling is here. I will feel it, but I will choose what it becomes. That is not weakness. That is power. There is a common misunderstanding about emotional detachment. People hear that word detachment and they picture someone cold, distant, disconnected from life. They imagine someone who refuses to feel, who shuts down and avoids vulnerability. But that is not what the Stoics meant. And it is not the kind of detachment we are here to practice. Real detachment is not the absence of emotion. It is the absence of slavery to it. Emotional detachment in the Stoic sense means you can experience the full spectrum of feeling: grief, joy, frustration, fear, and yet stay rooted. It means your identity is no longer tangled in your emotion. You are not the storm. You are the observer standing in the rain, aware, alive, but unshaken. And that kind of detachment, it is not cold. It is courageous. Because the truth is, feeling everything is not the problem. Becoming everything you feel, that is where suffering begins. When your sadness becomes your identity. When your anger becomes your behavior. When your fear becomes your limitation. That is what Stoic detachment helps you release. Detachment says, I see what I feel, but I am more than what I feel. You can miss someone and still move forward. You can feel fear and still take the step. You can feel frustration and still speak with respect. Detachment is not an escape. It is precision. It allows you to respond wisely while still feeling deeply. Imagine this: a friend cancels plans last minute. You feel disappointed. Naturally. But instead of spiraling, they do not care about me. I am always the one who tries. You notice the feeling, and then you investigate it. Why am I so upset? Do I feel ignored? Rejected? Am I attaching this moment to an old story from my past? You explore. And then you breathe. You realize the feeling is valid, but the meaning you gave it might not be. You let the emotion rise, and then you let it pass. That is detachment in motion. It is the ability to feel without drowning. The Stoics trained for this every day. They knew that if they did not build this inner stillness, they would be at the mercy of every storm around them. And the world has no shortage of storms. So, how do you build emotional detachment, not as a wall, but as wisdom? First, you observe before you absorb. When an emotion arises, you name it. You say, this is anxiety, or this is anger. You give it form, so it does not overpower you. You externalize it. not as a way to push it away but to relate to it consciously. Second, you ask, what story is this emotion tied to? What am I believing right now that might not be true? Because emotion without story is sensation. But emotion with story, that is where most of our suffering lies. So you question it. You break the automatic loop. Third, you remind yourself of your role. You are not here to feel nothing. You are here to feel everything and respond with clarity. So you ask, what would my wisest self do next? Not the most reactive version. Not the most afraid version. But the version of you that is grounded, awake, and intentional. You act from that version. And lastly, you let it go. You do not carry the feeling past its purpose. You thank it for what it showed you and then you release it. You do not drag it into tomorrow. You do not use it to punish people. You do not make it your identity. You let it move. Like a breeze through an open room. That is what emotional detachment looks like. Not avoidance, but mobility. Not numbness, but sovereignty. Because here is the hard truth: when you are too attached to your feelings, you give them more authority than they deserve. You start to believe, if I feel it, it must be true. But emotion is not always truth. Emotion is experience. And it deserves attention but not control. When you detach wisely, you start to notice how often your emotions were leading you into loops, saying things you did not mean, assuming things that were never real, acting from fear when you meant to act from strength. And now you pause. You pivot. You protect your energy. Because you understand that not everything that rises inside you needs to define what comes out of you. So the next time you feel overwhelmed by disappointment, by longing, by fear, say this to yourself: I feel this, but I am not this. I will allow it to pass through me, but I will not become it. You are not detaching from life. You are detaching from the illusion that emotion must dictate your direction. And in that space you finally find freedom. Discipline. It is a word we often associate with willpower, structure, or routine. Waking up early. Eating clean. Working hard. And yes, those things matter. But there is a kind of discipline that runs even deeper. A kind that is quieter, harder to track, but infinitely more powerful. It is emotional discipline, the ability to guide what you feel before it guides you. To feel the surge of anger, fear, jealousy, or sadness and not act from it blindly. The Stoics understood this as the foundation of personal mastery. Because what good is intelligence, talent, or ambition if you collapse every time your emotions flare? What good is strategy if your inner state is always in chaos? You cannot lead others if you cannot lead yourself. And the first battlefield is always internal. So how do we build emotional discipline, not just once in a while, but as a way of living? It starts with a shift in belief. Most people think emotions just happen. That how they feel is automatic, fixed, unchangeable. But the Stoics saw it differently. They believed emotion is the result of perception, and perception can be trained. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." The same is true for emotional energy. Most of our inner chaos comes not from feeling too much, but from investing that feeling in the wrong direction. So the first step is awareness. You begin to notice the emotion before it becomes action. You see the first signs: the tension in your chest, the story in your head, the impulse to defend, escape, prove, or withdraw. That moment of noticing is not small. It is everything. Because once you see the pattern, you can begin to change it. You are no longer unconscious. You are present. But awareness without direction is not enough. Discipline requires that next layer: a decision. A decision to not react just because it feels good. A decision to not send that message just because it feels urgent. A decision to not spiral into overthinking just because your mind is loud. Discipline is the muscle that holds you in place long enough for your wisdom to catch up. It is the pause that stops damage before it starts. And you do not build that muscle in dramatic moments. You build it in small, consistent acts of inner leadership. Like when you feel offended, but instead of snapping back, you sit with the feeling. Like when you feel afraid, but instead of running, you get curious and ask what part of you feels unsafe. Like when you feel jealous, but instead of comparing yourself, you focus on your own path. Every one of those moments is a rep in your emotional gym. Every time you choose to pause, breathe, reflect, or redirect, you are getting stronger. This is not suppression. This is leadership. You are not ignoring what you feel. You are commanding it. You are giving the emotion a job. You are asking, where do I want this energy to go? Because emotion is energy. But without discipline, it leaks. It spills into sarcasm, avoidance, passive aggression, or impulsive action. With discipline, that same energy becomes courage, focus, presence, action. Imagine the power of walking through your day with emotional control, not forced calm, but steady inner direction. Someone cuts you off in traffic, and instead of raging, you let it go. A co-worker takes credit for your idea, and instead of plotting revenge, you document your work and move forward. A loved one says something hurtful, and instead of attacking, you pause and ask, what is behind this? That is not weakness. That is strength most people will never understand. Because most people are ruled by their first impulse. They think speaking fast is being honest. That feeling something strongly means they must act immediately. But that is not truth. That is conditioning. And it can be rewired. One of the most powerful practices the Stoics used was premedit adeo malo rem, the premeditation of difficulty. Each morning they imagined the things that could go wrong. Not to feel fear, but to build readiness. They would say, today, someone may insult me. I may be delayed. I may lose something I care about. This mental preparation made them stronger, not colder. It helped them build emotional discipline before the trigger ever appeared. You can do the same. Before your day begins, remind yourself, today, I will face pressure. I will feel impatience. I will encounter people who are rude, stressed, or unaware. But I will remain composed. I will lead myself. This is not about being robotic. It is about remembering your center. About refusing to be pulled into emotional traps. Because life will test you. People will misunderstand you. Plans will fall apart. But if you trained daily to hold your ground, to choose awareness over reaction, you become unshakable. Not because you never feel, but because you never forget who you are while you feel. That is emotional discipline. And like any other skill, it grows with practice. You will mess up. You will slip. You will say things you regret. That is okay. The goal is not perfection. It is progress. The real strength is not in never falling. It is in rising faster with more clarity each time. So today, make this your practice. Do not wait for calm to find you. Bring it with you. Do not hope for people to be different. Prepare your response. Do not expect your emotions to disappear. Learn how to guide them. That is how you master yourself, not in theory, but in action. Moment by moment. Choice by choice. Calmness is often misunderstood. People think it is a personality trait. That some people are naturally calm, while others are just wired for chaos. But calmness, as the Stoics saw it, was not a temperament. It was a skill. A mindset. A strategic decision to hold your ground when the world tries to shake it. Calmness is not softness. It is strength under pressure. It is power without the need for noise. When everything around you moves fast, calmness is how you reclaim control. When others panic, lash out, or spiral, your stillness becomes an anchor, not just for you, but for everyone watching. And they will watch. Because true calm is rare. Most people are reactive, loud, emotionally entangled in every little thing. But you have another option. You can choose to be the one who does not flinch. The one who responds, not reacts. The one who listens deeper, speaks less, and acts only when it matters. This kind of calmness is not passive. It is highly active. It is what happens when you train yourself to prioritize clarity over comfort, principle over pride, and patience over impulse. And it is one of the most powerful tools you will ever possess. Think of it this way: when everyone is emotional, the calm person is the one who leads. Because they can see more. They can think clearer. They are not tangled in ego or fear or the need to prove something. They can step back, assess the situation, and choose a response that actually improves the outcome instead of adding more chaos. That is not just emotional intelligence. That is tactical wisdom. The battlefield of life does not reward those who feel the most. It rewards those who know what to do with what they feel. Calmness buys you time. It gives you options. It allows you to hold your power when others are busy losing theirs. But how do you practice calmness? It begins with awareness of what triggers you. You have to know your patterns. Where you tend to lose your cool. What buttons get pressed? What stories begin to play in your head when things do not go your way? You need to track these responses like a scientist. With curiosity, not judgment. Because you cannot train what you do not understand. Once you see the pattern, you can begin to interrupt it. Not by force but by space. You give yourself a breath. A pause. A chance to watch the feeling rise instead of being pulled into it. You say, here it comes, the urge to defend, to explain, to control. You do not obey it. You simply notice it. That moment? That is calmness being born. And then you go one step further. You ask yourself, what would the calmest, clearest version of me do right now? Not the ego version. Not the triggered one. But the grounded one. The version of you that is not controlled by the need to be right, fast, or understood, but committed only to truth, clarity, and alignment. Then you act from that version. Over time, this becomes second nature. Your nervous system adapts. Your self-minus image shifts. You stop identifying as the anxious one, the angry one, the impatient one. You start to see yourself as someone who is steady, especially when it is hardest. And people will notice. Not because you are performing calmness, but because you have become it. Your presence will carry weight. In meetings. In conversations. In conflict. In silence. Because calmness is loud without needing volume. But understand, this calm does not mean indifferent. It does not mean you do not care. It means you care deeply but wisely. It means you choose not to waste energy on what does not serve the moment. You reserve your strength for the battles that matter. Seneca said, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity. For he is not permitted to prove himself." Calmness is how you face that adversity. Not by avoiding it, but by meeting it with so much clarity that even chaos cannot pull you in. You become the still point in a spinning world. And in a time where everyone is rushing, your calmness becomes a form of rebellion. A form of leadership. A form of love. Because when you stay calm, you break cycles. You disarm drama. You model peace. Not just for yourself, but for those around you who are watching, wondering, hoping there is another way to live. And there is. It starts with one breath. And then another. Until one day, you are not just someone who practices calm. You are someone who embodies it. There is a powerful kind of freedom that comes when you stop taking things personally. When you realize that not everything said to you, about you, or around you has anything to do with you. That most people are not speaking from clarity, they are speaking from pain. from insecurity, from stress, from stories you are not even part of. And yet, we carry those words. We absorb them. We replay them. We make them about our worth. But here is the truth: the Stoics knew what others say or do says more about them than it ever does about you. Epictetus said it best: if someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. In other words, you allowed it in. You gave that comment the power to move you. You opened the door and handed your peace to a stranger. But it does not have to be that way. You can stop taking things so personally and start living from inner steadiness. It begins by realizing one thing: you do not need to react to every word. You do not need to correct every misunderstanding. You do not need to absorb every tone, every look, every slight. Most people are not aiming at you. They are reacting to their own inner world, their own fears, their own wounds. You just happen to be there. And even when their intention was to hurt you, why give them the satisfaction of watching you fall apart? Your power is in your non-minus reaction. Not because you are weak, but because you have chosen not to carry what is not yours. Imagine that someone throws a verbal dart, an insult, a passive minus aggressive comment, a public dismissal. In that moment, you have a choice. You can catch it, absorb it, replay it for days, or you can let it fall. You can say, "That is not mine," and keep walking. Not with coldness, with clarity. Not with arrogance, with peace. Because when you stop internalizing what is external, you free your energy. You stop living in defense mode. You stop constantly editing yourself to fit others' opinions. You begin to live from the inside out, not the outside in. And yes, that takes practice. It takes awareness. You have to catch the story your mind tells you when someone says something sharp. That instant reaction: I must not be good enough. They must be right. I have to explain myself. Pause. Question that story. Ask, is this really about me? Or are they projecting something they have not dealt with? 9 times out of 10, it is the latter. It also takes confidence. Not the loud kind. The quiet kind. The kind that says, I know who I am. I do not need your approval to validate my existence. I do not need your permission to be at peace. And it takes boundaries. Sometimes you walk away not to punish, but to protect. Sometimes you stay silent not because you are afraid, but because you are wise enough to know when words are wasted. This is emotional sovereignty. The ability to regulate your internal world regardless of the chaos outside you. And it is one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself. Because once you stop taking things personally, your life opens up. You take more risks because fear of judgment no longer chains you. You have deeper conversations because you are not scanning for offense. You feel more grounded because your sense of worth is no longer tied to someone else's emotional state. You become immune to manipulation because guilt and shame no longer work on you. And perhaps most importantly, you become a better listener. Because now, when someone speaks with anger or defensiveness, you do not meet them at that level. You do not mirror their pain. You rise above it. You ask, what are they really trying to say? What are they afraid of? What do they need that they cannot express? That kind of awareness is rare. But it is the soil where compassion grows. You stop reacting and you start relating. That is the Stoic way. Not indifference, but insight. Not shutting down, but choosing wisely. So next time you feel triggered by someone's words or actions, pause and ask yourself, what part of me is reacting right now? Is this about them, or is this waking up something inside me I have not healed? What would it look like to not make this about me at all? And, most powerfully, do I need to carry this or can I let it pass? Because not every battle is yours to fight. Not every comment is yours to catch. And not every feeling that rises needs to become a wound you carry. This is how you protect your energy, not by building walls, but by choosing which doors to open. You are not fragile. You are free. If there is one silent thief of peace that shows up in nearly every life, it is expectation. Not the grounded kind rooted in clear agreements, but the invisible kind built on assumptions, wishful thinking, and unspoken demands. We expect people to act like us, to see the world like we do, to understand our tone, mirror our effort, match our intentions. And when they do not, we feel betrayed, hurt, confused. But maybe what really hurts is not what they did. Maybe what hurts is that we thought they wouldn't. The Stoics warned against this kind of pain. Because it is not born from reality, it is born from illusion. Epictetus said, when you are about to find fault with someone, ask yourself the following question: what fault of mine most nearly resembles the one I am about to criticize? That quote cuts deeper than it seems, because it invites us to stop projecting our standards outward and start examining our attachments inward. So often, we suffer not because of how people are, but because of how we expected them to be. You want someone to communicate more clearly, but never told them how their silence affects you. You want someone to appreciate your effort, but carry resentment instead of sharing your needs. You expect life to reward your discipline on your timeline, and when it doesn't, you feel cheated. None of that is wrong. It is human. But left unexamined, it becomes suffering. The Stoic approach is not to stop caring. It is to stop assuming. To stop believing the world owes you alignment just because you are trying hard. To stop building your peace on things you cannot control, like how fast others grow, how deeply they understand, or how consistently they meet your standards. That is not cynicism. That is clarity. Because the truth is, people are not here to play the roles we wrote for them in silence. And life is not here to follow your script, no matter how noble your intentions. The Stoics practiced a kind of detachment, not from love, but from illusion. They loved fully, gave freely, acted with virtue, but they did not attach their identity to the response. They acted from principle, not from payoff. And that is a radical shift in how you live. Instead of thinking, I did this, so they should do that, you begin to think, I did this because it aligned with who I choose to be. Full stop. No transaction. No emotional invoice. No silent contract. That is how you become free. Because once your peace is no longer tied to performance, yours or anyone else's, you begin to experience a deeper kind of calm. A calm that says I can show up fully, even when others don't meet me there. I can give without grasping. I can speak without needing control over how I am received. I can detach from the outcome, not because I do not care, but because I care too much to let it control me. This also means you begin to examine your expectations of yourself. How many times have you felt like a failure, not because you actually failed, but because you did not meet a timeline you invented? How often have you beaten yourself up for not being further along, even though you are exactly where your path has prepared you to be? Expectation turns growth into pressure. It makes progress feel like punishment. But the Stoics reminded us virtue is enough. Effort is enough. Presence is enough. You are not falling behind. You are unfolding. So what do you do when expectations arise? You pause. You notice the thought they should have or I should be, and you ask, according to whom? Is this a story I wrote? Is this a rule I invented? Is this expectation helpful, or is it a trap? You replace should with is. You stop saying they should have known and start saying they didn't. Now what? You stop saying this should not have happened and start asking, what is my role here now? That shift from fantasy to reality is the birthplace of peace. Because when you trade expectation for observation, you stop resisting life. You start living it. You start listening more, demanding less. You begin to move from what do I deserve to what can I offer, From why is this happening to me, to how can I meet this moment well? And slowly, expectation loses its grip. Not because you expect less, but because you attach less. Because you no longer place your happiness in other people's hands. Because you finally understand peace is not about lowering your standards. It is about raising your self-minus awareness. There will come a time, maybe it has already come, when life will not feel fair. When your effort will not be met with reward. When your patience will not be met with understanding. When your honesty will not be met with appreciation. And in that moment, something inside you will want to scream, "This is not how it is supposed to go." You will want to fight, to protest, to demand correction. But life will not always answer that call. Because life, as the Stoic cite, is not fair. It is unfolding with or without your approval. And your power does not lie in demanding fairness. It lies in responding with integrity, even when fairness is denied. This is where emotional mastery is truly tested. Not when things go well, but when you do everything right and still get overlooked. When you stay kind and still get misunderstood. When you stay honest and still get betrayed. The question is not whether the world was fair. The question is, who were you when it was not? Because your values only mean something when they are challenged. Your calm only matters when you have reason to break it. Your clarity only matters when the world is clouded. The Stoics trained for this. They trained not for perfect circumstances, but for resilience in the face of injustice. Marcus Aurelius, even as emperor, reminded himself, daily you may not get what you deserve. But you will always get the opportunity to practice virtue. And virtue, in Stoic philosophy, is the real reward. So how do you stay emotionally grounded when life feels unfair? First, you remind yourself unfair does not mean meaningless. Just because the outcome did not go your way does not mean your effort was wasted. Every time you act from principle, you strengthen your character. Every time you choose patience over rage, composure over complaint, discipline over despair, you are becoming unshakable. That is not spiritual bypassing. That is spiritual strength. Second, you shift your scorecard. The world will keep measuring you by results, money, recognition, status. But the Stoics measured by response. Did you act with courage? With honesty? With compassion? That is the real scoreboard. And it is the only one you control. You cannot force others to see your heart. You cannot make life give you what you earned. But you can choose every time how you show up. And there is something deeply liberating about that. Because once you stop needing the world to reward you, you start living from a deeper motivation. You give without needing anything back. You serve without expecting applause. You love without needing it to be returned. That does not make you naive. It makes you free. And freedom is not about having everything go your way. It is about knowing who you are, no matter what comes your way. It is about being so rooted in your principles that even disappointment cannot shake your presence. Even injustice cannot break your character. Even pain cannot rewrite your values. And yes, that takes time. It takes failure. It takes heartbreak. It takes being misunderstood more than once and choosing to stay aligned anyway. But each time you do, you are carving a deeper core. You are proving to yourself that you are not a puppet of life's fairness. You are a builder of inner strength. So next time you whisper, "This is not fair," ask yourself, and what kind of person do I choose to be anyway? Because if life cannot always be fair, then let you be the one who brings balance to it. Let you be the one who acts with integrity when it is hardest. Let you be the one who stays composed when it costs you something. That is what Stoicism looks like in real life, not quotes, not theories, but choices made in difficult, quiet, unfair moments. And that is where true emotional mastery lies, not in control of others, but in control of yourself. Especially when the world is out of control. There are moments in life when the world goes quiet, not peaceful, but hollow. When the messages stop, the applause fades, the plans stall. You are left alone with your thoughts, your doubts, your shadows. No argument to distract you. No validation to carry you. Just silence and you. These are the moments when emotion rises from within, not because of something someone did, but because of something you feel about yourself. And in those moments, the hardest emotion to master is not anger. It is despair. It is the creeping doubt that whispers, maybe I am not enough. Maybe I am lost. Maybe all this effort means nothing. These thoughts are subtle. They do not shout. They hum beneath your daily noise. But when life slows down, they find space. And if you are not trained, if you are not grounded, they begin to feel real. They begin to feel true. But here is the truth the Stoics knew. Just because a thought is loud does not make it wise. Just because a feeling is heavy does not make it final. Your mind is a story-making machine. And left unchecked, it will take any discomfort and build a whole narrative around it. A narrative where you are the failure, the outsider, the one who does not belong. But none of that is real. That is not truth. That is emotional fog. And Stoicism offers a way through that fog, not by pretending it is not there, but by walking through it with your eyes open. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. But what happens when the mind itself becomes the event? When the enemy is not someone else, but your own self-minus talk? Then, you must become your own ally. That means first you acknowledge what you feel. You do not fight it. You do not rush to fix it. You name it. This is loneliness. This is self-doubt. This is the ache of not being seen. Just naming the emotion separates you from it. You are experiencing it, but you are not it. Second, you ask, is this emotion pointing me toward something I need to look at, or is it an echo from the past? Because not every wave is a warning. Some are just repetition. Old fear in new disguise. You must discern. And third, you return not to distraction, but to discipline. The kind of discipline that does not need motivation to move. That does not wait to feel ready. That says, even now, especially now, I will act. I will get up. I will breathe. I will move with purpose, even if my heart is heavy. This is not pretending. This is honoring your future self. Because sometimes the most stoic thing you can do is to move forward with doubt still in your chest. The person who wakes up lost and still chooses to walk. The person who feels forgotten and still chooses to show up. That is the one who builds strength. And do not mistake this strength for hardness. It is not about suppressing pain. It is about being with it without letting it rewrite your worth. Without letting it hijack your identity. You are not broken because you feel low. You are not failing because you feel unsure. You are simply human, living in a world that often confuses noise with meaning, and silence with irrelevance. But growth happens in the quiet. Transformation happens in the shadow. What you build when no one is watching is what makes you unshakable when everyone is. This is where emotional mastery deepens. Because it is easy to act composed when you feel confident. It is another thing entirely to act with integrity when your confidence has disappeared. It is easy to give when you feel full. But to keep giving, to keep living from principle when you feel empty. That is where greatness is forged. The Stoics trained for this. They reminded themselves daily, this moment does not define me. My response to it does. So next time you feel that silence creep in, and the old voices rise up again, pause. Do not rush to numb it. Do not scroll past it. Do not drown it in noise. Instead, sit with it. Ask it, what are you here to teach me? Because sometimes your loneliness is not a punishment. It is an invitation to return to yourself. to rebuild your foundation. To remember peace is not what happens when everything makes sense. Peace is what you create when nothing does and you still choose to stand tall. This journey began with a simple question: what if you could feel deeply without being ruled by what you feel? What if you could hold your anger without becoming harsh? Carry your sadness without becoming lost? Feel fear and still take the step forward? We have walked through philosophies and practices, stories and strategies. But in the end, it all points back to one truth. Emotional mastery is not about eliminating emotion. It is about anchoring yourself so firmly in who you are that no feeling, no reaction, no storm can knock you off center. And now, as we reach this final chapter, I will not give you more tools. I will remind you of what you already have. You have the power to pause, to breathe before you break, to choose reflection over reaction, to walk away not because you are weak, but because you have learned that not every battle is worthy of your peace. You have the strength to hold your boundaries without raising your voice, to speak clearly even when your heart is trembling, to forgive not because they deserve it but because you do. You are no longer at the mercy of every feeling that visits you. You have learned to be the host, the gatekeeper, the observer. You have learned that being calm is not a mood, it is a muscle. That clarity is not a gift, it is a habit. And that peace is not a place you find. It is the way you walk step by step, choice by choice, breath by breath. Yes, the world will still challenge you. People will still disappoint. Plans will still collapse. And emotions will still rise, uninvited. But now, you meet them differently. Now when anger knocks, you do not obey, you investigate. Now when fear whispers, you do not flee, you listen and lead. Now when sadness lingers, you do not drown, you sit with it, and then rise with it. Because that is what the Stoic does. He does not try to control the sea. He learns how to sail. You have become that kind of sailor. You have trained in silence. You have anchored in discipline. You have chosen depth over noise, and response over reaction. And this is just the beginning. Because emotional mastery is not a finish line. It is a way of being, a way of loving, a way of leading. Every day, the world will offer you new reasons to abandon your center. But you will remember your strength does not come from how little you feel. It comes from how well you respond to what you feel. So walk forward not perfectly, but purposefully. Not unfeeling but unshaken. Not guarded but grounded. And when the storms come again, and they will remember this, you do not need to be anything more than fully present. You do not need to control what arrives. You only need to master how you meet it. That is enough. You are enough. Now go live like it. This journey began with a simple question: what if you could feel deeply without being ruled by what you feel? What if you could hold your anger without becoming harsh? Carry your sadness without becoming lost? Feel fear and still take the step forward. We have walked through philosophies and practices, stories and strategies. But in the end, it all points back to one truth. Emotional mastery is not about eliminating emotion. It is about anchoring yourself so firmly in who you are that no feeling, no reaction, no storm can knock you off center. And now, as we reach this final chapter, I will not give you more tools. I will remind you of what you already have. You have the power to pause, to breathe before you break, to choose reflection over reaction, to walk away not because you are weak, but because you have learned that not every battle is worthy of your peace. You have the strength to hold your boundaries without raising your voice, to speak clearly even when your heart is trembling, to forgive, not because they deserve it, but because you do. You are no longer at the mercy of every feeling that visits you. You have learned to be the host, the gatekeeper, the observer. You have learned that being calm is not a mood, it is a muscle. That clarity is not a gift, it is a habit. And that peace is not a place you find. It is the way you walk step by step, choice by choice, breath by breath. Yes, the world will still challenge you. People will still disappoint. Plans will still collapse. And emotions will still rise uninvited. But now you meet them differently. Now when anger knocks, you do not obey, you investigate. Now when fear whispers, you do not flee, you listen and lead. Now when sadness lingers, you do not drown, you sit with it, and then rise with it. Because that is what the Stoic does. He does not try to control the sea. He learns how to sail. You have become that kind of sailor. You have trained in silence. You have anchored in discipline. You have chosen depth over noise, and response over reaction. And this is just the beginning. Because emotional mastery is not a finish line. It is a way of being. A way of loving. A way of leading. Every day, the world will offer you new reasons to abandon your center. But you will remember your strength does not come from how little you feel. It comes from how well you respond to what you feel. So walk forward not perfectly but purposefully. Not unfeeling but unshaken. Not guarded but grounded. And when the storms come again, and they will remember this, you do not need to be anything more than fully present. You do not need to control what arrives. You only need to master how you meet it. That is enough. You are enough. Now go live like it. If this message stirred something in you, don't let it fade. Write one thing down that you'll start doing this week. 2025 doesn't magically change anything you do. And your future begins the moment you decide to move, even just a little.